John McClain is with 610 in Houston. He's also on numerous segments throughout the week, throughout the country, including ours on Tuesdays. John McClain, Hall of Fame columnist, with us on 365 Sports. John, what is the deal with DeAndre Hopkins? Where's he going to end up? What's going on with him?
Hopkins, I feel terrible for him because they cut him. They could have cut him in March. If they cut him in March before the draft, when teams needed receivers and teams had money, he'd have been able to get a better deal. Now, some of the best teams used the draft and free agency to shore up needs at wide receiver. Hopkins did a podcast recently in which he said, let's see, Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore, and can't remember the other team, all are Super Bowl contenders. And Deshaun Watson has been campaigning for him like crazy. At this point, he wants to play for a team that gives him a chance to go to the playoffs and the Super Bowl with a quarterback an established quarterback. He don't want to go with a bad team with a young quarterback who's not established. And I would think if he accepts a reasonable deal and they use a little ingenuity on the salary cap, he's not going to get anywhere near what he was making. He was going to make, I think, $19 million. When he went there after the trade from Houston in 2020, he signed a 2-year, $54 million extension. And so I suspect it'll be one of those teams, might be the Cowboys, Browns, Bills. Something I'm interested in is DeAndre Hopkins has played in Houston and Phoenix. Does he care about playing in cold weather and bad weather? Would that be a hindrance to going with a team like Buffalo or Cleveland? So I'm really eager. He's still one of the most popular players in Houston history. And the downfall of the Texans began when Bill O'Brien, as coach and GM, traded Hopkins to Arizona in one of the worst trades in the history of sports at any level.
John, was there wide receivers can be the most kind of crazy malcontents when it comes to NFL holdouts and all that, but refresh my memory. Everything was great with DeAndre Hopkins until he and Bill O'Brien got cross, and then he wound up with the Cardinals, who are not a well-run organization. So this isn't really Terrell Owens type stuff, is it?
No, not at all. Hopkins I asked him one time, I said, there's receivers like T.O. and Chad Johnson. They'll pour gasoline all over themselves and light a match to get attention. I said, why don't you do that? He said, this game is hard enough to play without calling attention to yourself and making yourself a target. And it just wasn't his personality. And I liked him. And O'Brien, what he didn't like, and I laugh when I see national media people use New England as a possibility, and O'Brien is the new coordinator. It drove O'Brien crazy that Hopkins didn't practice. He always developed an injury, but he always played on Sunday when he was here. And so finally O'Brien didn't like it. He used his contract as an excuse, and he traded him in that terrible trade to Arizona, in which Arizona got washed up running back David Johnson and a second-round pick they used on TCU defensive tackle Ross Blacklock, who was a huge bust and is now back up in Minnesota. So there's no way Hopkins is going to go to play for Bill Belichick because he makes players practice. And if they don't practice, they don't play.
John, I was watching some of the videos you posted on Mark Berman, who's retiring from Fox in Houston. He seemed to be as steady and solid of a reporter, not as ever, but was one of the best you could always go to. When he reported something, it mattered.
Mark Berman is one of my closest friends, has been for over 40 years, and he is the best reporter I've ever seen, print or broadcast, anywhere, anytime. He just lives for scoops. His last days, June 12th, the Texans had a ceremony today in which they made him the second member of the John McClain Media Wall of Fame and the press box, and it was an honor to have him there with me, and he had his family, and we posed for pictures, and the McNairs talked about him, and D'Amico Ryans talked about him, and Nick Casario and the team president. It was he was embarrassed by it all because he never thought he was a big deal. And everybody knows with Mark retiring, Houston journalism will never be the same, not just because of the scoops, but because he covered everything. Rice basketball. He had things on Texas Southern and Prairie View A&M last week. And he's going to be missed by a lot of people.
Does that honor on the John McClain wall come with a gift basket or any kind of perks during the ceremony?
Besides getting his picture made with me?
Yeah. Oh, it's a big one,
Yeah,
John.
the Texans gave him some things that he was embarrassed. Gag gives. Last year they gave me a rake because I had written in a story about one time going to Bob McNair's house, and they were interviewing Butch Davis for a head coaching job, and I couldn't get anybody to come to the door. And McNair's yard had like 20 yard guys, so I went and put on a crummy shirt and hat I had in the trunk and grabbed the rake and raked from one side of his house to the other side of the front yard where I could see in the window to see them in Bob's library, except they had the windows closed and the curtains were closed and I couldn't see. So I just raked back across, and I wrote that story about raking his yard and getting nothing out of it. So he gave me a rake that I still have on my back patio.
John, thanks for your time, man. It's great to have you on again. You having a great summer?
I am, guys. Thank you, and sick 'em bears.
There's John McClain, Sports Radio 610 in Houston, also Hall of Fame and member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and also, of course, on the committee.